Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jazakallah khairan for joining our regular bi-monthly live from Gaza event. This month, we wanted to bring your attention to a campaign that MPACUK UK are working on. In December, Parliament will hear a bill brought forward by Richard Bergen MP to ban the sales of weapons to Israel on the basis that they are used for war crimes. So today's discussion is going to be about the real-life daily impact of Israel's aggression on the occupied people of Palestine. We really want you guys to understand how much of an impact this legislation in UK Parliament could have for Palestine and to participate in our campaign. Links will be given in the Facebook chat. We have three guests with us who will help us with this discussion and also what else we can do wherever we are in the world. There will be a Q&A somewhere in the middle and at the end of the discussion, inshallah. Leave a comment on Facebook if you have a question or a comment in support of our guests. And also, I must mention, if you want to see more of these kinds of events, please join our team as a volunteer. A link will also be in the chat. But with no further ado, I would like to introduce our first guest. Sister Wafa al-Udaini is a journalist and activist who lives and works in Gaza, Palestine, and leads the 16th October media group, which aims to give young Palestinians a voice through media. Today, she will be sharing her daily experiences to show us how Israel's military capability, which is enabled in part by the UK, is destroying Palestine society itself by impacting family life, medical care, education, businesses, and so on. Please, sister, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, firstly, for having me and for giving us this opportunity to speak up for our people here in Palestine. And actually, this topic is really so important, especially because, like so many times we just talk about how many Palestinians got murdered, how many Palestinians got jailed, or how many Palestinians got, lost their home, got their homes destroyed, and so on. But this is the first time really to talk how, like, the thing after that, like the impact that such attacks, such Israeli aggression affect or left on the Palestinian people. Indeed, maybe our aim here as Palestinian activists and young journalists here in Gaza, actually we are trying by all means in order to reach the whole world, in order to enlighten them about what is happening here in Palestine, especially in the Gaza Strip, and how is life under the Israeli siege here in Gaza. Indeed, like our main aim is, so many may think that why do you have to report about Palestine? Why it is so important? Actually, because we got like the distorted image, because the people outside Palestine, especially the people in the West, who are considered like the lifeline for Israel. They are actually the ones who strengthen the Israeli army to kill and to oppress the Palestinians more and more, like every single day. So we are trying by all means in order to enlighten those words that your money, that your taxpayers' dollars go for wrong, go for Israel, because they just use it to have like advanced weapons in order to oppress Palestinians more and more. So our main aim is just to enlighten the whole world, and we have to tell them that there is human beings here live in Palestine and they deserve life. They are looking, to live in a decent life, in a peaceful life here in Palestine. But the occupation, actually, by the occupation oppression, like every single day in Palestine, they prevent them from living like ordinary people, like across the world. And actually, like the impact that Israel, every time they just use the lethal force against Palestinians. But actually, whenever we say that there is aggression here on Gaza, for example, and like 1,100 Palestinians got murdered by Israeli fire, but okay, they just consider us as numbers. But they don't know that after that what happened, okay? Because the impact that such aggression leave here, for example, in Gaza or in Palestine, is really so huge. So we can say, for example, we have nearly 1 million Palestinians who became disabled because of the using of lethal force by the Israeli occupation. And actually more than that is the impact that this disability left, whether in the disabled person himself or herself or his family or her family. So actually so many got their relations destroyed because of that, because of the disability, because of the condition that this person, you know, becomes. And even we have like so many of the families got separated, so many women got divorced, and you can imagine how difficult life will be after all of that. You know, you are disabled, uh, you are restricted, and you are hindered from doing many things. So this will be, and more than that, we have occupation. We have every day there is attack, there is aggression, more than that. So it's really so difficult, and also we have nearly, and if we want to talk about the trauma and how the people here live their life, we can say that nearly most of the Palestinians, we cannot say that it's only about Palestinian children and that's it. No, every Palestinians actually got traumatized by the Israeli occupation, regularly attack on Palestinians. And also you can imagine how life will be or is difficult when you don't have electricity like 24 hours. We have never experienced to have electricity like 24 hours. And then you can imagine that. I mean, like for example, here in Gaza, we have Israeli drones all of the time over Gaza sky, and you can imagine we just, you know, like consider it as our music or something that we used to listen to, you know, drones all the time on your head. And from like after a couple of years, we have like Israeli attack where like thousands of people got massacred, like thousands of families got erased from the civil registry. And you can imagine, I mean, like, you know, when you have like aggression from time to time, this is really it's so bad. And even after every aggression on Gaza, we have so many stories that nobody, I mean, dare to talk about such heartbreaking stories. And also when you are restricted from moving from country, from traveling, from exiting your country, like whether for example for studying or even for getting a treatment outside, or even if you want also to travel to visit families and visit relatives outside Palestine. It's really so heartbreaking. So many people got their scholarship. They just lost their scholarship because of the closure of borders, for example, because Israel just restrict them from exiting Gaza to another area, another country, in order to get their you know, like their higher education. And actually I need like not 10 minutes or 15 minutes to talk about how like the impact that the Israeli occupation attack leave in Palestinian on Palestinians. Actually I need like more than that, because there are so many things that we need to highlight or to shed the lights on. For example, like, regarding the latest aggression on Gaza, I wrote an article about an Israeli pilot who actually participated in the latest aggression on Gaza. And he publicly said that, because blowing up residential blocks or residential buildings was a way to vent the army's frustration after they failed to stop the rockets firing from Gaza. And you can imagine when an Israeli soldier, for example, just they admit that they just like have fun when they bomb Palestinians. They just have fun when they kill Palestinian children when they just kill or massacre families. Well, they are like, latest aggression. We have so many of massacres get committed, and nobody talk about this because Israel just bombed them when they are in their homes. They are just living, sitting with each other, like because they fear to get outside their house, because maybe they are going to be killed or target by Israel. But the Israeli rocket or the Israeli missiles actually rain on their homes, and then they got killed. Like, we have so many families got actually get massacred during the latest aggression. And also this Israeli pilot, actually he spoke along with many others in an interview conducted by the private Israeli TV station, Channel 12, identified only by the first letter of his name. He didn't mention his name, but we heard his voice. And also, actually, we heard another pilot who said the same thing. He said he didn't underestimate the intensity of the attack he and his colleagues carried out against Palestinians, adding that they use tons of firepower and ammunition during the deadly assault on Gaza. He also discussed his and his colleagues' thought during the attack. I'm going to quote him. He said, "I went out on a mission to carry out an airstrike with the feeling that destroying the tower is a way to vent frustration over what is happening to us and over the success of resistance group in Gaza in hitting us." I mean, they, because Palestinians here, they just use, we can say, homemade rockets in order just to defend themselves. They, comparing to Israel, they have nothing. Israel have the advanced weapons, and for the people, I mean, especially in America, the American administration, they just say that Israel has the right to defend themselves, but when it comes to Palestinians, they don't have the right to defend themselves. Actually, this is really unfair. And here when we talk about Israeli soldiers, they just say that we are killing Palestinians for fun. We want to prove that we are the superpower. We have the superpower. We are the chosen people, and nobody can talk to us. And this is like, it's really so disappointed. I mean, we are really disappointed from the world because they just support such people, while those people killing innocents for fun, and like to convince themselves that they are the superheroes or whatever. And actually, I'm not gonna speak for. I think it's my other colleague turn, but I want to conclude by saying that here Palestinians, actually the Palestinians here in Palestine, they are like human beings, and they have so many stories that need to be told by the whole world, and the people actually like to live in peace, like to live a decent life here in Palestine, like like the ordinary people across the world. But just give them the opportunity. Stop arming Israel. Stop aiding them with weapons, with advanced weapons, because Palestinians got like every day they got massacred. Yeah, I mean, like every day there is a storming for the houses, for Palestinian houses in the West Bank. Every day there is assault on Palestinians. I mean, just this morning, or sorry, at dawn, today at dawn, we just heard that a Palestinian prisoner died in the Israeli custody. You know why? Because of the medical neglect. And you can imagine, I mean, what is happening in the Israeli occupation jails, actually, we can just describe it as hell, because I mean, when we have Palestinian prisoners, patients, actually, when they want to complain to the administration in the Israeli jails, they just give them painkiller. And you can imagine that when you have like, I mean, like you suffer from something in your heart or another thing, you don't have to have painkiller. You have to do like a surgery, but they don't do surgeries for prisoners, and that's why we have today a Palestinian prisoner died in the Israeli jails, and you didn't hear this whether in CNN or BBC or any of the mainstream media, because this distort the image of the Israeli occupation, and sadly, there is violations of international laws like every single day here in Palestine, and we hope that the world, when they know the truth and act for Palestinians and stop arming Israel and stop the occupation of Palestine. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Sister Wafa. It's always a privilege to have you with us. The time that you give us, it's a window into how life is continuing in Palestine under occupation. So I'm going to move on to our next speaker now. So Muslim Imran is a Palestinian in Malaysia and leads PCO Malaysia there. He will be talking about examples of what he has experienced and seen himself in Palestine, and why the world needs to stop arming Israel. Please, brother, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, and good day to you all. I'll try to be brief. I would like to first of all thank the organizers for this initiative, for this webinar. We need more of these programs, and thank all those who advocate Palestinian rights. Now, the Palestinian issue is an issue of grave injustice. It's an ongoing suffering. It's a sad story that continues to get sadder and sadder every day. The problem has not started with the Israeli onslaught on Gaza in May 2021. It did not start with the Israeli military attack on Gaza in 2014. It did not start with the Israeli attacks on Al-Aqsa Mosque over the past decade. It did not start with the Israeli invasion of the West Bank and Gaza in 1967. It did not even start with Nakba, the ethnic cleansing that took place in 1947 and 1948. It dates back to the sinister role of colonial powers, which conspired to strip the Palestinians their right over their land, their homeland, in the early 20th century. When these powers sought to destabilize the Middle East and dissect the ailing Ottoman Empire, they decided to strip the Palestinians their right of self-determination, and they forced into Palestine a foreign invasion. It started first with the Foreign Secretary's Balfour Declaration in 1917 and the military invasion of Palestine by British troops, but it coincided with the Zionist movement's interest. The Zionist movement started its mass immigration campaign to Palestine, and instead of living side by side with the Palestinians or creating a harmonious society, they decided to force Palestinians out of their homeland. And over the years, this Israeli occupation of Palestine developed from a settler colonial migration to Palestine to a mass campaign of ethnic cleansing in the 1940s, what we all term as the Nakba. It developed further into an expansionist rogue state that attacked Egypt in 1956, attacked Jordan, Syria, and Egypt in 1967, attacked Lebanon in 1978, attacked Lebanon again in 1982, and continues until today to strike in Syria, strike in Lebanon, and occupy the West Bank and Gaza and the rest of Palestine. So this is a story of a defunct extremist ideology that has, which is Zionism, that has met the interests and conspiracies of colonial powers, and it was imposed over the Palestinian people who have lived for centuries in peace with their neighbors. Palestinian Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived in peace under different empires and dynasties. But unfortunately, when the colonial occupation came over, it turned our life into an ongoing misery. So this historical context is very important, because some people think we are advocating an end for Israeli settlements in the West Bank only, or an end of the blockade of Gaza. But all these problems have a root cause. It all started there with colonial occupation. Other nations were lucky enough to get their right of self-determination, to free themselves of enslavement, of foreign occupation, but the Palestinians have not achieved this yet. And we have struggled for over a century to get our right, our basic right of self-determination, but unfortunately we have not managed to get it yet. But our struggle continues. Now, how has Israel evolved over the years? It started with this extremist ideology. It became a state in 1948 over the blood and bones of the Palestinians in the ethnic cleansing that took place in 1948, as documented by Israeli historians themselves, like Professor MPACUK and others. The Zionist militias created a new state over the Palestinian land and the blood and bone of Palestinian people. And this state continued to evolve into an expansionist settler colonial regime. But over the years, with the accumulation of power, the Zionist leadership and the Zionist political elites started to develop an apartheid regime in Palestine, not very different from the one that was erected in South Africa in the past. They started to impose racist policies over the Palestinians, segregate the residents, target dissidents, detain Palestinians. More than 1 million Palestinians have been detained by the Israeli authorities since the year 1967. And they continue to detain more than 5,000 Palestinian political prisoners. This regime evolved over the years with the shift of the Israeli society from the center to the right. We have witnessed extremist policies that would call cries and complaints anywhere in the world. But unfortunately, because Israel is the blue-eyed little son of colonial powers, it is always ignored and accommodated. The policies that the current Israeli governments commit are no different from apartheid in South Africa. And apartheid is bad and wrong in South Africa. It's bad and wrong everywhere else. The international community started to realize how bad the system that Israel implements is. In recent years, the United Nations Economic, Social, and Cultural Commission of West Asia, for instance, issued an important report in the year 2017 that described Israel as an apartheid regime, and it documented how exactly Israel is an apartheid regime. Of course, this report called a lot of international outcry from the Friends of Israel until the commissioner herself had to resign. It also, the Israeli apartheid became too obvious, too visible to be ignored, that groups like B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights group, documented that Israel is also an apartheid by a report published in January this year. Later on, another report published by Human Rights Watch, a well-respected international human rights group, described Israel in April 2021 as an apartheid regime. What we mean by apartheid, to be short, it's a system that tests weapons on the people under its jurisdiction. It's a system that kills children, murders children, detains and abuses children, that groups more than 2 million people in the largest open-air prison in the world, in Gaza. It inflicts pain on the Palestinians, restricts their movements, etc., etc., etc. In order to end this apartheid regime, the whole international community has to cooperate. The Palestinians have been struggling. They will continue their resistance. They will not stop. Whether the international community likes it or not, we will continue to defend our right of existence. But the international community has to play a role. One of the major moves should be to recognize and acknowledge Israel as an apartheid regime, and apartheid has to be dismantled. Another important move would be for the international civil society groups to unite and coordinate their efforts to end Israeli apartheid, to stop arming the Israeli war machine, to boycott the Israeli apartheid system through initiatives like BDS campaign and others. And finally, it's necessary for the Israeli society to wake up. Somebody has to ring the bell to wake them up, because even though they treat the Palestinians as subhumans, they treat us, they demonize us, but we do not demonize them. We think they are humans who deserve basic human rights, but they have to stop the system that they erected in Palestine, the apartheid system that continues to murder our children until very recently a 16 years old boy was murdered in Jerusalem, and today a prisoner passed away inside Israeli jails. 2 days ago, a young Palestinian killed in the north of the West Bank, and it's a misery that continues to unfold every day. We have to do something to stop this grave injustice that is taking place in Palestine. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I believe these webinars are eye-openers. They will certainly leave an impact, and I hope more of them will come in the future. Thank you, Akhi. Back to you.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much, Brother Muslim Imran, for that comprehensive and very logical explanation of how Israel started as an internationally backed colonial project, and therefore in this modern time it remains a responsibility on the international community to restrain Israel, and obviously weapons bans and so on help as well, exposing its apartheid ideologies is key as well, and so on. The question is, about how Israel's military capability and aggressive nature and so on, it impacts what should be normal everyday life. Some times of the year, like preparing for Eid, or like now preparing for Christmas, in any other part of the world, it would be a happy time. But how has it affected normal life?
Yeah, in brief, feasts in Palestine are amongst the most difficult times. The Eid, Christmas, and other events are usually targeted by Israeli authorities. They try to make our lives more difficult during these feasts. I do remember when I grew up in the West Bank, in the city of Hebron. I do still remember that almost every Eid, the Israeli occupation forces would close down roads between cities, between Hebron and Jerusalem, and Palestinian society is very socially connected. So you would have family members in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem, in Hebron, and elsewhere. And the night before Eid, they would barricade roads. They would bring. I do remember one of the Eids. It was a rainy winter season, and they dug the roads in many parts of our town, and created some sort of barriers with the mud and the asphalt that they have destroyed, making Eid a miserable experience, because it was rainy, mud everywhere. You can't visit your relatives anywhere. This is an ongoing experience. And if you want to visit your family in the old town in Hebron or Jerusalem, for instance, you have to pass by 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 checkpoints. Sometimes you have to go into segregated roads, some for Arabs, some for Jews. I just feel that they don't like to see us happy.
It's disgusting. There's no other way of putting it. It's disgusting, deliberately trying to ruin what should be a happy day for someone else, digging up roads. It's just disgusting.
They just want us to leave. They just want millions of Palestinians to pack and leave. But this is not going to happen.
Inshallah. So the question was, how has Israel's military aggression affected times of the year that should be happy, like preparations for Eid or Christmas? So Brother Muslim Imran was telling us about how there was one year where they literally dug up the roads between the towns to stop families meeting up for Eid and Christmas, for Eid. But what are other things that happen during days or before days that should be happy, like Eid or Christmas or Easter or so on, or Ramadan?
Yes, okay. Actually the occupation tries by all means to destroy the life of Palestinians. I mean, like to kill the fun or to kill the joyful inside the Palestinians. For example, I mean, regarding the latest Eid in Palestine here, Eid al-Adha, Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Adha. Actually, it was there was like Israeli aggression on Gaza here, and the first day of Eid, instead of preparing like prepare ourselves for. For enjoy our time, because sometimes people decorate their homes with the stuff to welcome this Eid, and actually there was nothing of this preparation occurred at that time, and the first day of Eid was like not ordinary day, but a day with full of sadness, with full of sorrowful things, and so many heartbreaking tales and the stories occurred, and even some people got massacred during the first day and second day of the latest Eid on Gaza, on Palestine. For example, you know that restriction movement here is not. There is restriction on movement. You can't exit Gaza and Palestine easily. So it's really so difficult. It's really so difficult. For example, I mean, for even Christians here in Gaza, they cannot exit Gaza to go to Bethlehem to celebrate their Christmas. So they just prevent them from going, outside Gaza, and even from moving freely, here in Palestine. So yeah, it affects us, and sometimes we don't feel the joyful that we have to feel during these joyful moments in our Eids. Yeah.
So thank you for that very much, Sister Wafa. And I know that you have to head out soon. So Jazakallah khairan for your time. Really appreciate it. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mick Napier. He is a Palestine activist based in Scotland as a founder member of Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which is distinct from the English and the Welsh campaigns as well. He will contribute to today's discussion by giving his thoughts on why the UK needs to stop arming Israel, and how he has faced down false accusations of anti-Semitism because of his outspoken support of Palestine. So please, Mick, go ahead.
Thank you, Ahmed. Can I just say it's a real pleasure to follow after Wafa and Muslim, because I agree it's an excellent description of the horror that's visited upon the people of Palestine and Gaza, and it's also a very lucid analysis that locates the problem, not just in recent horror committed by the State of Israel, but arising from the whole Zionist project in alliance with the British Empire to dispossess the Palestinian people. So I want to build upon what they've said, and it really makes it unnecessary for me to make a few points. But perhaps the most striking example I can give you is that Britain still supplies sniper rifle parts to the Israeli military. And we know from all sorts of investigations, and we also have the testimony of the culprits, that on one occasion, one sniper boasted in the Israeli media that he had shattered 43 knees in one shift. He shot 43 Palestinian men in the knee. He maimed them, given them life-changing injuries. He'd made them, badly crippled and maimed. He'd obviously devastated the fortunes of 43 families. And this crime was just one particular shift. And the British government continues to be massively culpable, massively complicit in the Zionist project. But I don't want to dwell on this, even though I think that when you add it all together, the testimony of your other guests, it boils down to a very simple explanation. Israel is trying to remove as many Palestinians as possible from Palestine, and it's inflicting very creative suffering upon those people in every way that it possibly can, from controlling the number of calories that it allows into Gaza per person. This came out in evidence. mass killing, shooting individuals to kill, mass incarceration, torture, killing Palestinians through medical neglect, and so on and so on. But I don't want to dwell on it. That's the first 3 minutes. Let me say my idea is the point I want to make, backed up by evidence, is that it's the pro-Israel faction who are afraid. And they are afraid because in any anti-colonial struggle, the winners are not the side with the military superiority. That wasn't the case in Algeria. It wasn't the case in South Africa or Vietnam or anywhere else. It's the side which shows the determination to absorb the terrible punishment inflicted upon them. Because colonialism is simply a system of organized violence to crush a population and extract value from them. That's the reality that we learn from every anti-colonial struggle. And the odds may be greater against the Palestinians than almost any other anti-colonial struggle, but I think the outcome of victory remains possible. Why are the Israelis? Well, first of all, are the Israelis afraid? Look, let me give you one example, and it only gets better from our point of view. In 2004, the EU conducted an opinion poll of its own citizens. They interviewed many, many thousands of citizens, and when the results were published, EU citizens believed, from Lithuania to Dublin, they believed that Israel was a major threat to world peace. So hostile were the opinions of Europeans in Britain, Germany, and elsewhere towards Israel that the EU spokesman, Franco Frattini, the foreign affairs spokesman, apologized to Israel for the views of Europeans, and he assured Israel that these opinions would not influence EU foreign policy towards Israel. The same speech could be made by Boris Johnson or any other European leader. They're afraid of public opinion, and that public opinion is remarkably consistent in hostility to Israel and increasing hostility to Israel over the years. The BBC does an opinion poll every year, and I don't trust very much on the BBC, not even the weather, but these opinion polls starkly reveal that Israel is deeply unpopular. It's always very near the bottom of the poll, despite massively favorable media coverage. Whenever popular opinion is allowed to express itself, the results for Israel are very bad indeed. I mean, only a month ago, we leafleted the fans going into the Scotland-Israel football game at Hampden. We gave out leaflets, we had a demonstration. Later, we learned that the fans inside booed the Israeli national anthem when it was played, demonstrated their hostility, for which the Scottish Football Association has been fined 8,000 quid to make sure they don't do it again. That's a relatively trivial example. But whenever even juries are allowed to express themselves, the people who smashed up the arms factory in Derry in Northern Ireland during the Israeli assault on Lebanon in 2006, a jury found them unanimously not guilty and told them that they were right, that if you're passing by, their defense was, if you're passing by a door and you hear a child being abused behind that door, it is justified to prevent that greater crime to smash down the door. And this jury in Belfast found the people who admitted they smashed up the arms factory selling arms to Israel, they found them unanimously not guilty. The same result, it's not an Irish thing, the same result was achieved in Brighton in 2009 during after Operation Cast Lead, when people there went into an arms factory and smashed up the factory, did £250,000 worth of damage, and the jury found them unanimously not guilty because this was necessary to prevent a much greater crime. So the Israelis and the pro-Israel crowd are very, very worried about public opinion. That's actually why they tried to silence us. You know, if they were winning the debate, if public opinion was sympathetic towards Israel, you wouldn't find these fake anti-Semitism attacks on me and hundreds of other people to try and silence us, because they would allow us to speak as long as there was no popular public opinion in support of that position. They're silencing the debate because they've lost the debate and they know it. A couple of other examples. A worker, Stan Keeble, was fired from his job in London a couple of years ago when he attended a demonstration called by Jewish Voice for Labour, the Jewish organised demonstration. Stan attended it, and when he was standing on a public street speaking to somebody, not from the podium, he made the point, which is controvertibly true, that just as French people and Danes and Norwegians cooperated with the Nazis in World War II, so did some Zionists. Many Zionists did, and he made that historical assertion for which he was fired from his job. Only a few weeks ago, the tribunal awarded him 70,000 quid and said this was a massive attack on free speech. Time after time, we find that when people stand and fight, the University College Union, for example, was taken to court by a Zionist member who said that they were institutionally anti-Semitic. The UCU won the case absolutely hands down. The Zionist effort was ridiculed and trounced by the panel judges and so on and so on. They are afraid. Let me give you the final example. When Ron Prosor, the Israeli ambassador to London, 2 ambassadors ago, the one we've got now is a complete monster, but you know, the predecessors were simply a little bit shrewder. When Ron Prosor left London to go to the UN as Israel's ambassador there, he wrote an article in the Daily Telegraph. It's the usual nonsense, but it's very revealing. He said when he left, there was a crisis in public opinion in Britain. And he said, Britain's like he compared Britain to a high-rise building. And he said, look, in every floor of the building, it's a problem. It's awash with anti-Israel hatred. What he meant was, we know what they're doing. He said, at the penthouse, relations with the government and with corporate Britain are absolutely excellent. The problem is public opinion. And he said, if this continues and gets any worse, it will cause problems for state-to-state relations. And that's our grounds for optimism. Every time we look at public opinion, we find that Israel is very worried about it. That's why they're shutting it down. When they discuss among themselves, they understand that there's a crisis for them, not in terms of the solidarity they get from the elites, but in terms of the hostility of the great mass of public opinion right around the world. There are a couple of exceptions to that. I don't know why Nigeria is one, but there is. But virtually the whole planet, Palestinians have already won a decisive battle by their resistance, by their heroism, by their standing firm against incredibly superior force. They have won this battle for public opinion. It's not trivial, and I think going forward, it will be quite decisive. Now, I've been on trial for 5 years for anti-Semitism, and I won't bore you with the details. But during that time, we asked each other, what can it be? What did you do? Nobody had an idea what the content of the accusation could be. We had disrupted an Israeli state-sponsored event, a musical performance. And when we went to court, this official, 2 years in court, 22 appearances, it costs a lot of money. And he stood up in court and said, it is racist to say the words, end the siege of Gaza. The court gasped. The sheriff, we call magistrates sheriffs up here, threw the whole thing out, ridiculed the charges. And the same thing was repeated 4 or 5 years later. I was also on trial for actually talking about spilled Palestinian blood in Operation Protective Edge. A couple of us were in court, and the prosecutor said, look, when you talk about this blood, you don't mean Palestinian blood. You really mean a medieval blood libel against Jews. The sheriff threw this out, and it took 3 years for it to come to a head, but it was thrown out. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say they're afraid. They're afraid of public opinion, and that's where we have to build. I spoke to a young man at COP26 in Glasgow last week. He'd come over from California, and he's a member in Oakland, California. His name's Sharif. He's a member of an organization called AROC, the Arab Resources and Organizing Center. Since 2014, since Protective Edge, they have turned away every Israeli ship that comes into Oakland port. They started in 2014. Another ship tried again this year, and the workers refused to unload the ship, and it had to steam out and go somewhere else. Now, 2014 is quite interesting for me as well, because we haven't achieved anything as marvelous as that. But in Scotland since 2014, no Israeli theatre group or musical performers or any cultural events have taken place publicly. We drove them out of the biggest arts festival on the planet, the Edinburgh International Festival. And we did that by protest. We got poets and we got authors and we got the great and the good, some of them, to sign letters calling for cultural boycott. But you know, it was teachers and students and bus drivers and firefighters and unemployed who went to the theatres and demonstrated their anger and fury at what was happening to the Palestinian people and the hideous reality of a racist state of Israel. And they never come back. The groups have been driven out by popular mobilization. The racist, I'll finish by saying this if I may, Ahmed, the racist JNF, the Jewish National Fund, patron is Tony Blair. So you know there's something very dirty about it. It is a racist extension of the Israeli government, which is a charity in the UK. We in Scotland have protested them vigorously for the last 15 years. They no longer fundraise openly. They report the fundraising after the event, but they know if they publicise a future event, we will be there in large numbers to protest their racism, their complicity in the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. They're throwing Palestinian families onto the street in East Jerusalem, and also their dirty history of helping to plan the Nakba and the death schools that operated in the Nakba by preparing with their research beforehand. My 15 minutes are almost up. It's exactly on the ground of that Muslim Imran has laid out, that this is a problem of colonialism, acting as an agent and an ally of the imperial powers in the region, and that's what has to be defeated. But I come back to the point I made earlier. The Vietnamese won, the liberation movement in South Africa won, Algeria did pick out the French. It is possible to defeat by an alliance of those in Palestine who are resisting with a solidarity movement around the world that stands on that firm ground that Muslim Imran has laid out, and knows that we can't expect anything in the short term from our governments, but that public opinion is with us. And if we stand firm, that public opinion always supports those people who stand against Israeli apartheid.
Thank you very much, Mick. You know, in pointing out that opposing the behavior and the ideology of Zionism is a position of moral integrity, and therefore, in the process, if any supporters of Israel come up against you, then because of your position of moral integrity, you have nothing to fear. Public opinion has already been won over, and everything thereafter is a winning battle, inshallah. From the point of view, obviously, of those of us in the UK, the privileged of us in the UK who are in a position to support the Palestinians, it's thanks to the heroism of the Palestinians themselves, obviously, that we are able to have a cause to continue supporting even after a century of oppression. So a question for the two of you, and then we'll wrap up. I suppose following on from public opinion and so on, but basically each country has its own domestic worries. So why should the general public outside of Palestine, outside of the region, worry so much about what Israel is doing? Is there anyone who'd like to go first? I think the question is basically, you know, people have enough on their minds. Why should people outside of Palestine or the region care so much about what Israel is doing?
Okay, thank you. I think injustice in one place is unacceptable anywhere. Those who support Israeli occupation or support Israel on so-called moral grounds should check their moral compass. If we allow Israeli brutality to continue, silence is sometimes an endorsement of crimes, war crimes. We don't want the crimes, the war crimes that were committed in Algeria, the war crimes that were committed in Vietnam, and most recently in Iraq and Afghanistan, to continue to be committed in Palestine. If we don't stand up and stop it, I assure you that we've lost our moral standing. People will question us when we are in trouble in our own nations and we call for solidarity. People will question us, why were not you in solidarity and in support of other very clear-cut moral struggles? I wouldn't accept to see slavery resurrected, for instance. I wouldn't accept to see discrimination against minorities anywhere. Why would anyone accept to see discrimination, brutality, and war crimes against the Palestinians going continuously? And you know what? For the British society in particular, I assume some of the audience are from the United Kingdom. For the British society, you have a moral responsibility to end the atrocities in Palestine. Yes, individuals might not be liable for the crimes and the mistakes of their governments, but if you don't correct this historical injustice, it's going to continue, and no one else can correct it. You have to right the wrong that continuous British governments have committed over the years. You see the Red Indians and the Aborigines in Australia, the people who were colonized in Indonesia, for instance. These people are waiting for a recognition of their suffering. You don't have to compensate them financially or materially, but you have to acknowledge the crimes that were committed against them. And I would like to point to what Ilan Pappé, a well-respected Jewish historian, Israeli historian, who wrote in The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, one of his excellent, the most excellent works on documenting Nakba. He said the first step for the Israeli people to correct the historical injustice is to recognize Nakba, to acknowledge that Nakba happened, to acknowledge ethnic cleansing happened. Same applies to the British society, the elites in particular. You have to acknowledge the grave mistake that was committed as early as the early 20th century in order to change things. But until today, Britain does not even want to recognize a Palestinian state. It's going to take time. We shouldn't give up. With the efforts of people like our good friend here and yourself, I think things will change. You know, big struggles like this take time, but eventually we will get our freedom.
Inshallah. Thank you for that, Mr. Imran. And I'd like, to pass the question over to you as well, Mick, but like also adding in that generally it can very easily feel like, look, we've got enough domestic issues to worry about, austerity, the £20 cut from benefits and so on. There's enough on our plates. Do we need to add another stress about, what's being sold, what weapons are being sold to this country all the way over there? Do you have anything to add to your thoughts?
Sure. I mean, Palestine is a major domestic issue in Britain. Jeremy Corbyn was crushed politically by an alliance of the Zionists, the Tory party, Starmer, and all the right wing found a cause where they could claim to occupy the moral high ground. The merchants of death who sell sniper rifle parts, they could claim the moral high ground by opposing anti-Semitism. It was fake from beginning to end. So it's a domestic issue. Only 2 days ago, the Scottish government, which is kind of mainstream, it's not a radical outfit, they were attacked by the Board of Deputies, club in Scotland, Scojec, who said that because they were advising businesses not to invest in the illegal settlements, I mean, it's not a radical position. You know, the Scottish Trade Union Congress has a general policy of boycott of Israel. Government was merely, they opposed BDS, but they were advising companies not to be careful, to be careful before they invest in these settlements. The Board of Deputies and the Union of Jewish Students came out and said, it was reported in the Times, that this was like desecrating a synagogue. Now, if I attack the Saudi government for dissolving dissidents in acid, and you then say to me, Muslims feel very unhappy about this, we're afraid to go to university, this is like desecrating a mosque. I say, don't be, this is crazy. Look, I have a voice, I have to be able to speak and tell the truth. So, you know, Galileo was dragged by the Catholic Church to recant when he said that the earth rotated around the sun. And they made him recant, and he said, he was reputed to have said, while he was recanting, whispered, yeah, but it moves, yeah? And truth is quite a stubborn thing. We tell the truth about what's going on. The Israelis and the pro-Israel gang try to shut us down. But you know, every time people stand their ground, they win. The problem for Corbyn was he vacillated. He threw some of his friends overboard, and then he was thrown overboard, and there was nobody left to protect him. So it's a domestic issue. It's unavoidable because they are trying to shut us down. But you know, there's a factory not far from me, and probably a Hamid not far from you, which is selling weapons of murder to people, anybody who'll buy them, to kill anybody whom they particularly want to kill, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and so on. People in the future will look back and say, how did you go to sleep at night when you know that there was somebody there making weapons to kill innocent people in Yemen or Palestine for money? You know, we were brought up to hate Germans, or we were made to hate Argentines. You know, you get terrible atrocities of people killing each other, mass bloodletting in Bosnia, Serbia, and so on. But you know, it passes. It passes. We don't worry about Germans anymore, except maybe they take too much space on the beach with the big towels. It's a thing of the past, and yet it was ferocious at the time. Blood cools, hatreds superseded in one way or another. But if you're a banker who just invests money to make profit from the killing, there's no hot blood at all. It's just a calculation of profit and loss. We have to fight this because really, we're beating it. We're making a stick to beat our own backs. Boris Johnson is not just the enemy of Muslim Imran and Wafa and our people. He's my enemy as well. And you know what they did with Grenfell Tower allows so many brown and black people to burn to death in London. It's not a foreign affairs issue, but it's connected. We can see the connections. We need to discuss them. And I think Palestinians need allies. It's important to discuss who can these allies be. And I stress again, if I'm allowed a final remark, this is not a Muslim issue. Muslims may burn more brightly on this than other people, but popular opinion is with us, you know, absolutely. So we need to build these, we need to be intransigent about Palestinian human rights. We need to realize it's not the problem, is not Jews. The problem in South Africa wasn't white people, it was white supremacy, where I was superior to you guys because of this, from birth till death. It was an evil system. And the problem's not Jews, the problem is a system of Jewish supremacy in Palestine over non-Jews. And we have to defeat that system. And popular opinion will be with us if we are determined. Yeah. So I know it's terrible. The cost to the Palestinians of their liberation will be very high. It's always high for every colonial people. Our job is to try to reduce that cost by an amount that we'll never know, but through building a solidarity movement. And I appeal to Muslims to join us and to join other groups. By the way, final point, if I may, we always win when we go to court, big exception. After 2006, big demonstrations at the Israeli embassy in London. 4 months later, young Muslims were picked off the street, were picked in shopping malls. A whole number of those young Muslims went to court. They weren't organized, they were isolated, they were very respectable, they'd never been in demonstrations, they'd led pretty sheltered lives, I think. and they pleaded guilty to misdemeanors because they were promised there would be no custodial sentence. One guy was sent down for a long time for throwing a plastic water bottle at the gates of the Israeli embassy. They were isolated, they didn't know each other, they were picked. You have to be organized. You have to join something, because when they come for you, it's important that that you're not isolated.
Thank you so much, Mick. And I'll let you have that last word, because there's nothing more to add. It really is a case of being organized, being united, and keeping in mind that those MPs who support Zionists and Zionism and their atrocities, they are not the kind of MP you want representing you, representing your family when you need their support and help as your representative in Parliament. Thank you so much, guys. I'm going to end the live stream there.